Hello, welcome friends. Today my topic of discussion is necropolitics. Necropolitics. Let's start. Necro comes from the Greek root word necros, meaning corpse. Necropolitics then translates to the politics of death. Philosopher Achille Membe describes necropolitics as the capacity to define who matters and who does not, who is desirable and who is not. Necropolitics is the use of social and political power to dictate how some people may live and how some must die. Membe defines the necropolitical as the power and capacity to dictate who may live and who must die. The deployment of necropolitics creates what Membe calls death worlds, or new and unique forms of social existence in which vast populations are subjected to living conditions that confer upon them the status of the living dead. Achille Membe, author of On the Post-Colony, published in 2001, was the first scholar to explore the term in depth in his article published in 2003 and later in his book Necropolitics published in 2011. Membe identifies racism as a prime driver of necropolitics, stating that racialized people's lives are systematically cheapened and habituated to loss. Now, I am giving an example of necropolitics. The example is the ability for a state to subjugate populations so much so that they do not have the liberty of autonomy over their lives. Necropolitics is often discussed as an extension of biopower. Now, friends, we must know a term, that is biopower. Biopower is Foucauldian term. Necropolitics is often discussed as an extension of that biopower, the term for the use of social and political power to control people's life. Foucault first discusses the concepts of biopower and biopolitics in his The Will to Knowledge, published in 1976. The Will to Knowledge is the first volume of his book, The History of Sexuality. The History of Sexuality is 4-volume book, we know. Foucault presents biopower as a mechanism for protecting, but acknowledges that this protection often manifests itself as subjugation for non-normative populations. Membe's concept of necropolitics acknowledges that contemporary state-sponsored death cannot be explained by the theories of biopower and biopolitics. He says that under the conditions of necropower, the lines between resistance and suicide, sacrifice and redemption, martyrdom and freedom are blurred. Jasbir power assumes that discussions of biopolitics and necropolitics must be intertwined, as the latter, that means necropolitics, makes its presence known at the limits and through the excess of the former, that is biopolitics. The former, that is the biopolitics, masks the mutability of its relationships to death and killing in order to enable the proliferation of the latter, necropolitics. Membe was clear that necropolitics is more than a right to kill. It is also the right to expose other people to death. His view of necropolitics also included the right to impose social or civil death, the right to enslave others, and other forms of political violence. Necropolitics is a theory of walking dead, namely a way of analyzing contemporary forms of subjugation of life to the power of death, forces some bodies to remain in different states of being located between life and death. Membe uses the examples of slavery apartheid, the colonization of Palestine, and the figure of suicide bomber to show how different forms of necropower over the body reduces people to precarious conditions of life. Achille Membe builds on Foucault's idea of state racism, but relocates the argument to spaces of colonial occupation and the apartheid state. Membe adds two key concepts to Foucault's analysis. The first concept is the relation to enmity. The relation to enmity concerns the threat from fictional enemy. The second concept is the state of exception. The state of exception is the condition or situation where the rule of law is suspended in response to the perceived threat, the threat from fictional enmity. The state of exception defines a special condition in which the judicial order is actually suspended due to an emergency or a serious crisis threatening the state. For Membe, the colony is the ultimate space of exception. It represents the site where sovereignty consists fundamentally in the exercise of power outside the law and where peace is more likely to taken on the face of a war without end. In such settings, necropolitics is a structure. The sovereign right to kill is not subject to any rule in the colonies. In the colonies, the sovereign might kill at any time or in any manner. Colonial warfare is not subject to legal and institutional rules. It is not a legally codified activity. Membe argues in the economy of biopower, the function of racism is to regulate the distribution of death and to make possible the murderous functions of the state. But in biopolitics, the function of racism is also to naturalize abandonment via the tacit agreement. Membe writes, I have put forward the notion of necropolitics and necropower to account for the various ways in which in our contemporary world and weapons are deployed in the interest of maximum destruction of persons and the creation of death world, new and unique forms of social existence in which vast populations are subjected to conditions of life conferring upon them the status of living death,